Hi, and welcome to this module around performance management. But first, let's get started with the introduction around what performance management is about. Performance management is fundamental to continuous improvement. We use performance management to measure and identify our improvements, to then use the continuous improvement methodology and approach to drive up the performance. Then, hopefully, we can see a change in our performance, and that's how performance management and continuous improvement go hand in hand. Zooming in on performance management, it is a continuous process. It starts with setting clear goals and targets, to then make it visual, and then discuss and review it. Each of these items will be separated out in more detail in the following slides. Looking at some of the challenges around performance management we have to overcome, we typically see, first off, that we might have different interpretations of the measure or the definition. So basically, one person thinks a pencil is 5 paper clips, and the other person says one pencil is 3 paper clips. They're still both talking about a pencil, but different measurements. Another item is that performance culture is new to most of our teams. The next one is that we typically focus very much on what we think about how the world should look like. And with that, we have too little focus on what the customer truly values. Another issue that we see is that KPIs are often not visualized well, making it hard to find problem areas. Another challenge we often observe is that the measures often do not show the end-to-end picture, meaning that they are too focused on a too narrow of a scope and are not able to give you an overview of how the end-to-end process is doing. And once we are doing performance management, we kind of jump to solutions without knowing the root causes. This means that a strong focus should be on selecting and visualizing our KPIs and installing performance management meetings that will help you overcome most, if not all, of these challenges. Looking at performance management in more detail, when we set targets and goals, the customer should be central in helping us define what our goals and targets are. We also need to know what is the difference between a KPI and a metric. So why is the voice of the customer so important? Well, first of all, if we don't know what our customers value, how do we then know if we're performing at the right level? And in order for us to understand what is the voice of the customer, the first step is define who your customer is. Once you have identified your customers, you can then try to go and understand what the value is for your customer. So the first step is to ask what the customer wants. And that can be done by collecting customer feedback. Then we can go and analyze it. And then once we know what we need to deliver, we can then build a customer experience. If we look at the first step, collect customer feedback, we can use some common used sources. The first source is an interview. The second could be surveys. And the third could be a focus group, where you have a larger audience explaining or sharing feedback in a verbal way. Then we go in analyze to gaining the insights. And that can be done by building an understanding from the feedback through identifying common patterns or using data to test the feedback. Do we see the same as the customer describes it? And next is to act on the customer experience. We can use the feedback and the analysis to then determine what leads to a positive impact for the customer. Performance and KPIs are typically one and the same. However, let's look first at what is a KPI. A KPI stands for a key performance indicator, and it provides insights on how well a certain activity is performed. It shows the actual score against a set target. We should be having a small number of measurements to assess the overall performance, and it should help us reach our goals and work together rather than using sentiment and gut feeling. Meaning, we're no longer managing on emotion, but we're managing through data. KPIs typically have the following characteristics. First of all, they should be smart. The next is that they should follow tree logic, which is built up through underlying metrics to further zoom in if needed. And the team monitoring the KPI should be able to influence it. Why do we need KPIs? Well, KPIs can tell us how well the activity performs, alarms you in the case of a major issue, points you to the direction of the improvement, and can also be used as a tool to improve performance. Remember, performance management helps us to measure how well we have done our continuous improvement. KPIs cannot tell you what are the root causes for the bad performance. This is where you actually need to dive in using continuous improvement to identify what are the root causes. KPIs can also not tell you who is doing a good or a bad job, and they should not be owned by a single person or team. Another very important item is to not use KPIs to punish bad performance. The way to look at KPIs is to identify improvement areas and then use continuous improvement to improve the overall performance. Now, not everything we measure is a KPI, luckily. If we were to have too many KPIs, we would not understand what are the most important items to look at versus what are just measures. The two items we distinguish between are KPIs and metric. The first one, the KPI, should highlight the actual performance against a set target. And it should be an indication of the most important element that can indicate how well a certain activity is performed. A metric is a measure without a set target and is most of the times more detailed than a KPI. If you look at the two graphs on this slide, you can see on the left-hand side the percentage payment cleared on time. The red item is a target and the actual performance is shown in the bars below. It shows us how well we're doing against our set target. On the right-hand side, you see a distribution and it tells you how many items of a certain type are performed for a specific business. I can't say if this is good or bad, it is just a measure. And that's the difference between a KPI and a metric. Now that we have spoken about the target setting and the goals, it is making our performance visible. That is the next step in our performance management flow. Making it visual means that we use visuals to help communicate the challenge. And we'll show a couple of different visualization options and tools as part of this section. Human beings typically like graphics, pictures, much better than text or plain numbers. This is why visualization is used for setting and visualizing our goals and our progress, and therefore communicating our performance. Visualization helps to maintain set standards. It has to be simple and intuitive. It has to be implemented with and maintained by the employees. One other item is that measuring and visualizing our performance is not enough. We need to be able to translate the observations into action and value. Here are a couple of examples on how to visualize data. It goes from maps to charts to flows, and it is therefore important to choose a visualization that helps you and your team to spot issues quickly. A couple of tools that you can use to make your performance visible. The first one is Bluebook. This is our central tool used for our KPI reporting and has a standardized set of KPIs that we all measure in our organization. The next one is Spotfire. This tool is the basis for building our Bluebook. However, you can also use this to visualize your data beyond, for instance, what you can in Excel. The desktop client can be requested via MyIT as an approved software. Next, of course, is the classical usage of Excel. Excel has the ability to give you charts or overviews at a very simple way. Another item that we use to highlight our performance or assess our performance is Celonis. Celonis is our process mining tool that is used to understand how our processes are executed. The things you can find in Celonis are things such as how long does a process take, what is the level of variation, so meaning different ways of doing the process, and what is the percentage of automation within the process. Remember, select the right tool and visualization to assess your performance. The next item is to discuss and review the performance, or actually the observations seen from the visuals. Here it is tasked to review the current performance with your team to then identify areas for improvement and set clear actions to improve or maintain the performance. So why is it important to review and discuss our performance? Numbers and graphs can only tell us so much. It does not tell us the stories behind. Numbers cannot explain us really what is happening. So therefore, in the review, we can highlight where the performance is consistently below target. We can seek out if the observed numbers are related to a one-time incident or to other items beyond just one incident. It will help us to further investigate and understand the true nature of the issue. Each and every team in our organization will use some kind of form of performance management. In our operations teams, you'll see the daily huddle meetings. These are short stand-up meetings at a daily frequency. Next up are, for instance, weekly huddles with the whole team or the team management. Then it goes up to the site leader with a weekly huddle, and then it goes into an operation review or a bi-weekly meeting. All these meetings will help you to escalate the major issues to the next level, and feedback might come back from the other meetings back to your team. Separate meetings might be held around escalations, where a daily huddle is used to identify what are the key priorities or burning issues that the site leader or the site management team needs to take action on. To facilitate the different types of meetings, we have different approaches. We have the daily huddle using a huddle board. We use team meetings where we can use the ComCell approach. And we can have a strategic performance review using a bowling chart. All of these three are going to be explained in the upcoming few slides. So what are huddles? A huddle is a short meeting used to review our performance and check the progress made on improvement actions. The general topics on these huddles are people. We do a check-in on how you are doing. We talk about our current performance and review it, and therewith identify opportunities to improve. And an actions part. In this actions part, we define new actions and we review pending actions to make sure that they are progressing according to plan. Huddles are not meant to be a personal performance review. They should also not be a forum to discuss issues in detail. That's where we have other meetings for, such as Coffee Corner. We can have one-on-one meetings, team meetings, problem-solving meetings, but not at the huddle. And that means it's also not a place to solve our problems. We're just sharing the news on where we are against our actions. A typical flow during the huddle is reviewing. Are there any KPIs off target? In the improvement part, we're going to seek out what is causing this and how can we fix it. This is not done during the huddle, but at a separate meeting. And then we ask the question, who will do it and when will they complete it by? When it comes to assigning activities or actions, we go from describing what is briefly the problem, so what is the KPI that is off target, assigning it to someone, and we assign a due date. Zooming in a little bit more on these huddle meetings. The team huddle is a 10 to 15 minute daily meeting, or if the team is really big, 30 to 45 minutes weekly, where we begin with checking in on our people and performance. Are the people in the team doing okay? What support may they need? And is our performance okay? We then move into tracking progress on our improvements, and there's room for sharing information with the team, such as announcements, upcoming events. Here it is handy to share, for instance, that people are going to be off for leave, or that there's system changes coming up. There might be an important person visiting the team. It's general information you like to have out in the open for everyone to see. We have a standard for how these boards should look like, and the example above is showcasing this. So at the top left-hand corner, you have people, left bottom, the announcement and events, top right, the performance, and then right bottom, the continuous improvement or improvement section. What is important to know is that there's 3 phases during each huddle. If you are the facilitator, and that is a rotating role within the team, the facilitator will follow up on 3 steps. The first one is before the meeting, so preparing, making sure that everything is up to date. Then during the meeting, make sure that all the items are touched on, including a check-in on the people, that we make sure that new concerns and assigned owners are there, and we have an updated progress on our improvements. Then after the meeting, we implement the agreed actions. We keep a record of each day's update, and we enter larger improvements into our portfolio so we can assess if this is a project that we need to start. During our huddles, we will see 2 distinct roles. The first one is the facilitator. That person is the host for the meeting. The second is the timekeeper. That ensures that the meeting finishes on time. The facilitator is a rotating role where every person in the team gets to contribute in turns. That means it's not only a meeting managed by your team lead or your manager. It's all of us that will rotate. The day that you are the meeting host means you have a couple more activities to do. The first step is to make sure it is prepared. So the performance details on the board are prepared for the meeting. During the meeting, you make sure that the discussions stay at the meeting goal, and that is to review performance and actions, not to problem solve. And ensures that detailed discussions are moved to a different forum. You are at that moment the manager of the meeting, and it's up for you to manage it to meet the goals. Make sure that at the end of the meeting, you have appointed the next meeting's facilitator. That way you can do a handover if needed. Then to the timekeeper. This is also a rotating role where every person in the team gets to contribute in turns. And general rule of thumb is that we spend about 4 minutes on people, 5 minutes on performance, 5 minutes on action review, and 1 minute on sharing general information and a team update. For you as a timekeeper, make sure that you follow the flow and gently cut in if needed, or allow for a little bit longer of a conversation. It's a rule of thumb, it's not set in stone that these are the timings per activity. Now to the ComCell approach. A ComCell is a 45 minutes to an hour meeting, which is typically done at a weekly basis, where we focus on checking in on the people, we discuss what is top of mind, we focus on our strategy and priorities, and check in on our performance. When do you use a ComCell? It's commonly used where a team consists of multiple domains. For instance, finance, HR, and continuous improvement all sitting in the same meeting. A ComCell can also be used when a team is lesser focused on operational activities, but instead looks at top of mind or tactical and strategic priorities. If you have operational needs, then the huddle might actually be fitting much better with your team. How does a ComCell look like? On this page, you see an example where at the top left, we look at the people, so a check-in on the people. We also look at recognizing and nominating good performance within our teams and perhaps outside of our teams. Top of mind, that can be categorized to whatever the team is required. Then the strategy, the strategic and priority items are mentioned at the top hand right, and communication So what is the stakeholder calendar looking like? So who's meeting whom, and what are the messages that we need to bring to our stakeholders? For the more strategic progress, we propose on using a bowling chart. What is it? A bowling chart facilitates monthly checkpoints that show the trajectory against agreed targets. The chart contains metrics and baseline measures, and these are the items coming from your strategy deployment. So basically, your team objectives. It is part of the performance management discussions in the teams, and as mentioned, it is used to make sure that progress against strategic team objectives is discussed and reviewed, and it helps to make sure that the team is focused on achieving these strategic objectives. The bowling chart is part of the strategy deployment process, which is part of a separate module in this whole training curriculum. Let's take a look at the example. So on the example here, we first have the target to improve, then the owner, and then we have the target at the top and the actual performance at the line below it. Anything in orange means we're not meeting our targets yet. The same counts for red, and green means we are meeting our target. More about the usage of the bowling chart will be explained in the strategy deployment module. In summary, performance management is central to continuous improvement and vice versa. Continuous improvement is the tool to drive up our performance, and performance management is to see the progress against our targets and improvements that we have made. Performance management is a continuous process that starts with setting our targets and goals, that makes it visible to identify how we're doing against our targets and goals, and we discuss and review our performance to ensure we understand what is behind the numbers. We also are using a tiered model where every team is using different meetings, all aligned, making sure that from an operations point of view, all the way to a strategic level, we are in tune with what is happening at all levels in the organization.